Hi, welcome back to the Online Jewelry Academy. I'm John Ahr and I'm your instructor. Today I'm going to show you some soldering basics. I'm just going to show you how to apply heat to make the solder flow. If you're interested in proper setup and the tools required for this operation, there's another video which is called Setting Up for Soldering. Now, the first thing that I want to mention are the tools. We're going to use a basic mini butane torch, which will get to the proper temperature for soldering. We're also going to be using proper ventilation, and we will show you how to set this up in another video later on. Now, you'll notice that I've already set up a soldering surface. I have a reflective hardened charcoal block sitting on top of a ceramic kiln shelf piece. Now, I'm going to be soldering copper to copper and silver to copper. To do this, I'm going to need a flowing flux. This is a dandy or a handy flux, which is a heavy-duty flux. You'll notice I'm holding the silver wire with a third hand that has a insulated cross-locking set of tweezers installed into it. I have a paintbrush for the flux, a soldering pick, a pair of tweezers, and then I also have some solder that has been cut into pallions. Sometimes they're called chips, but the correct term is a pallion. A pallion is usually about 1 millimeter square, and it can be cut from either sheet solder or wire solder. If you use wire solder, I suggest that you use a hammer and a hammering surface to flatten the wire flat so that it doesn't roll away from your project. Now, these pallions, like I said, are about 1 millimeter square, and in this case I'm using hard solder. Now, you'll notice that even the bottom of the container is marked with an H, and the lid is marked with an H. That's because I want to know what top to put onto what box so that I always know that that's my hard solder. Okay, now we're ready to start. The first thing that we want to do is we want to take our flux and apply it with a paintbrush. Now, the flux is a water-based vehicle, and it should go on very easily. And you don't need a lot of it. Now I'm going to apply it to this, and I'm going to apply it to our little wire area as well. Next, I want to position the pallions. I'm going to use a pair of tweezers for this. Now, the reason why I'm using tweezers is because I don't want to put flux into this box and dirty these pallions. If you do that and you run into a problem, a great way to clean them up is to knock all the pallions out of the box and into the toe of a pair of nylons. Then what you can do is you could pickle the pallions, quench or neutralize them in water and baking soda, and then set them on a paper towel and allow them to dry, and then put them back in your box. Alright, so what I want to do with the solder pallions is I want to bridge the seam that I'm trying to close. Now, a lot of people will ask, well, how much solder should I use? The best recommendation that I could give is that you place the solder pallions bridging the seam about every 3 millimeters or so. And that should provide you with enough solder flowing into that joint in order to close it. The types of joints that I'm trying to solder together today are both called butt joints. It's where the material butts into itself. Alright, so I'm placing solder onto this seam. Again, it's bridging that seam. And then I'm going to place just one piece of solder next to the wire that I want to solder to the disc of copper. Okay, we're ready to apply the heat. Before we light the torch, let's talk about the proper use of the torch. You want to hold the torch with whatever hand you don't regularly use, because you don't need to control the flame that much. What you do need to do is hold the solder pick with the hand that you use most often. I'm right-handed, so I hold the solder pick in my right hand. Alright, we're ready to start. First I'm going to turn on my torch and light it. Now what I want to do is I want to heat the whole thing. That's worth the price of admission. You want to go around the whole area that you're trying to solder, and you might even want to try to ignite the charcoal block a little bit so that it will reflect heat into the project. Don't heat directly on top of the solder pallions. If you do that, you're more than likely to oxidize them, and then they won't flow. Alright, so you want to watch the material, and right now I see the copper is taking on that beautiful coloration that you get from the heat staining. And pretty soon we're going to move into the territory where the copper heats up to a point where it's hot enough to transfer heat into the solder, which will make it flow into the seam. Now, if any of your pallions have moved while you started this, you can take your solder pick and just kind of shove them right back into place. You want the solder pallions for this project to bridge the seam. Now you'll notice that the copper is getting completely oxidized and turning black on either side of the area that I've previously painted with the flux. Okay, so you want the whole thing to come up to temperature at the same time. So I'm going to make nice circles so that I'm hitting both sides of copper for a similar length of time. And pretty soon that heat will go directly into my pallions. And you want to watch your pallions to see when they flow. They're beginning to flow right now. So I'll add a little heat directly on top. And if I want to, I can actually pull my pick across the seam to ensure that the solder flowed in between the two items I'm trying to join. Alright, now this is successful. So we'll leave that there to cool down for a second, and we'll move over here to solder this post. Now you notice I've got the wire that I'm trying to attach to the disc held by a cross block tweezer that's set up on a third hand base. And I do have a fiber, heat resistant fiber attachment on this cross block tweezer so that I can handle it. Alright, now we want the wire to hit the disc perfectly, and for flux to be on the disc, and for one pallion to be against the wire on the flat disc surface. So again, I'm going to light my torch. Now, I'm going to go the same way. I want to heat around the piece, and what this does is this generally starts to warm up the flux so that it turns into a dry material. The next thing that happens is once all the water's been evaporated, it turns into sort of a chalky material. Alright, and the solder is getting ready to flow into the wire, in between the wire. There we go. And we've got it. Now the important thing here is never to heat the wire. Because the wire is thinner than the piece of metal we're trying to join it to, if you heated the wire, it's just going to melt the wire before you get any kind of soldering fusion. Okay, now both of these things are really, really hot, and what I want to do is I want to cool them off. This one's easy. I can pick up the tool, and I have some water down here, and then I'll just unlock the cross-lock tweezers, and it goes right in there. This one I'm going to pick up with a pair of tongs. Now I let it cool on the block a little bit, so it's a little bit attached, so there we go. Great. Now that both of these items are quenched, I can handle them with my bare hands. And if you look, you can see how the oxidized copper stayed clean in the area where the flux is applied and solder flowed in between. Likewise, on the disc, let's see if I can position it so you can see it, the outer area darkened with oxidation from the heat, but the central area where the wire was to be soldered to it stayed nice and clean. Cleanliness is really important. You want to think of solder as a little girl that's been told to stay clean. Stay in your Sunday best and keep it clean. So she's not going to go anywhere where there's dirt. So keep an area clean for your solder. Now you know the basics of soldering. For more information on soldering and the use of other tools, log on to the onlinejewelryacademy.com and check out our other videos. We also have products available too. Thanks for watching.